it's just started raining. This is the perfect setting to film this video. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the perfect reads for that autumn-winter transition. These are books that are perfect to curl up with when it's storming and raining outside. The kind of books to read when the weather is absolutely miserable. Books that seem like they would suit a cup of coffee or hot chocolate and a blanket. And I've tried to divvy this up into a couple of different genres. I guess I've kind of gone for adult fantasy, some more contemporary options, some young adult fantasy, and then also some that are like adult fantasy adjacent. I love it when the temperature starts to drop outside, and I don't know if it's the weather per se or if I just have more free time on my hands, but this is the time of the year that I read the most. I honestly can't think of anything better than on the weekends or the evenings and it's raining and I have nowhere to go, curling up in my pajamas with a blanket and a hot drink and a book, one of these books in particular. Like, I genuinely don't think you can beat that feeling. So just before we dive in, the books I've kind of chosen for this list feel perfect for that gap between the spookiness of Halloween and the festiveness of Christmas. They might have a bit of creep factor, a bit of gothic elements to them, but they're not too Halloween-y, but equally they haven't quite got to that full-on winter snowy vibe yet. That's kind of the category I'm putting all of these books in. So grab a hot beverage of your own. I have gone for tea today. By all means, get curled up and cozy, and let's dive into the list of these books. I think I'm gonna start with adult fantasy because I have some really exciting recommendations in that list. Let's just dive straight in there. Starting off with a book I'm currently reading, but by the time you see this, I will have finished it. I would usually only include books that I have loved and finished on this list, but this one I am obsessed with, even though I'm only about halfway through, and I know it's going to be one of my favourite reads of the year. That book is Anathema by Kerry Lake, and then book 2, Eldritch, is also out, so I guess I'm recommending both of these. Anathema is a gothic, dark, fantasy romance book. I will say this has definitely got a higher level of world building and magic system than I was expecting, so particularly if you like your fantasy books with a lot of exposition and a lot of world building and a lot of backstory and a really intricate magic system with lots of different levels, this is the one for you. I read fantasy all year round, but I definitely tend to pick up the like chunkier, heavier, lore-based fantasies around this point. But this does have a fantastic romance plotline to go alongside all of that. I mean, just the book itself and its gothic nature makes it feel perfect for this time of year, but it is definitely a little creepy and atmospheric, and even though it's not kind of a wintry ghost tale, that's almost how it feels. I have really been vibing with reading this. Now, a content warning, this is a darker fantasy, so there are some dark romance tropes, or I guess just darker elements to the story as well, actually. Just meaning our characters are put into some darker, grittier situations. So definitely check the trigger warnings before picking this one up if it does interest you. There is something about this spooky, misty forest and something demonic feeling about this. Even the male love interest just feels like autumn winter, and I don't know how to describe it other than that. We have witchy feelings in here, some like iconic gothic elements like the woods and crows. I am absolutely devouring this book, and I am very excited to jump onto book 2 as well. This is not the only Kerry Lake book on this list, but this is the only one I've included in fantasy. But if you do like the sound of Kerry Lake, they also have some other gothic fantasies that might be up your street. I know there's a retelling of The Phantom of the Opera that is very popular. I believe that one's called Master of Salt and Bones. I could have got that mixed up. She definitely has a few. But everything in this book, from the setting to the magic to even how the characters are dressed, just gives that overall kind of creep factor and those gory gothic elements, and I do feel like I should be curled up with some fluffy socks feeling safe whilst I read this. And I think this could be a really good one for you as well if you do like your gothic fantasy romances. The next book I want to tell you about is one that has just come out, and that is The Sacred Space Between by Kaylee Reid. This is another gothic fantasy standalone, and again this one has a pretty strong romance plotline to go alongside that. This is easily one of my favourite books that I have read all year. This one follows the story of a religious iconographer. She paints kind of religious icons of the saints, and she is sent on a bit of a mission to capture the icon of an exiled saint. This was jam-packed with trauma and sadness, and the characters are all a level of miserable that I aspire to be. They just give me the impression that their socks are always wet and cold. The majority of the book is set within this like kind of rundown manor. It feels like it's creaky. It feels like the rain does not stop going the entire time this story is taking place. When she first rocks up at this exiled saint's house, she is absolutely drenched from the weather. and I don't think she ever dries off. I really enjoyed how miserable everybody in this book was. I don't think there was one happy person until towards the end. And there is an element of an unravelling mystery within this story that you're kind of going on with the characters. It's a journey they're taking you along with them on, and it just felt kind of cozy. I remember I read 15 pages of this book, and I think I put an Instagram story up, and I was like, everybody's so miserable, I love it. But it really is. This is super moody, super atmospheric, feels a little poetic at times. He says this quote to her at one point. He says, "Nothing less than blasphemy brought you to me," and honestly, I cried. This one is less eerie, I would say. There isn't too many horror elements in this one like there is in some of the other ones on this list, especially like Anathema. So I wouldn't worry too much about this one being a scary one or anything like that. But it has that slower, moodier, creakier atmosphere to it that I really like reading at this time of year. This actually felt to me a little bit like The Night and the Moth. If you've read The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, I think that you'll find this one quite comparable, and if you liked one, you'd like the other. Although saying that, I have a friend that did not enjoy The Night and the Moth, but did really enjoy this, so maybe give it a go even if you didn't enjoy that one. This is a standalone as well, so as much as I really enjoy reading longer series at this time of year with worlds I can really get truly invested in, there is something a bit more quick and easy about picking up a standalone, and you're with these characters for a short amount of time, but it still felt so meaningful. This was everything I was hoping it was going to be when I heard this was getting released. And as I said, it is a newer release, so if you haven't got your hands on a copy yet, then I would absolutely recommend doing so. And the romance in this is like that simmering, slow burn. Like, they're both so paranoid about each other. Overall, really enjoyable. I gave this 5 stars, actually. Whilst we're on the topic of The Night and the Moth, let me add The Night and the Moth to this list. This is another one that kind of plays with that religious trauma in a way that I found really enjoyable. I found this quite different from Rachel Gillig's other works. There's an element of wackiness to this that was within the other books from Rachel Gillig, but definitely it was dialed up here. The romance doesn't play too big of a plot line in this. It isn't like one of the top notes of the story, I guess. And there were bits about this that were a little bit creepy and did leave me guessing, but again, not at the level that I would say this has any specific strong horror or anything like that. For me, this was cozy in a number of different ways. I think, again, the setting, it felt quite atmospheric. I find Rachel Gillig's writing to be a little bit poetic, a little bit lyrical, and that was the same for this too. But I'd say the way that this one differs from the rest of the books on this list is there wasn't really anything super specific about the setting or the characters that felt super great for this time of year. I mean, they just naturally fit in. But I would definitely say this mystery that is unraveling, like the book gives off cozy vibes even though it's not a cozy fantasy remotely. There's elements of this journey and even elements of her relationship with the knight that I was gone on them, you know? It felt like curling up with some kind of whodunit. And I think, again, there was something weird about the way in which Sybil's magic works in this, and it being kind of within the dream sphere that just felt, yeah, great for when it's raining outside. I hadn't actually thought to include this book on this list. I have included Rachel Gillig's other books, which I'll talk about next. But then when I added The Sacred Space Between, I was like, actually, there are a lot of elements between these two that I think are quite similar. So whilst I think The Sacred Space Between, personally for me, is a bit more autumnal in its tone and vibe, actually, if you've already read that one and enjoyed it and you're looking for something similar, I think this could be the book for you. As I mentioned, Rachel Gillig's previous series, this is the Shepherd King duology, or One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, in my opinion, feels definitely more moody and autumnal. For this one, with me, it was really the world. I mean, it quite literally is drenched in a mist at times. There was parts of this that felt like mist over rolling hills and creepy woods. Also a lot of elements of trees within this one, and I don't know why it's just the autumn and trees that have a connection in my brain, but I did the same thing with Anathema. Like, anything with a wood or a forest or like trees is a big part of the plot, which they do kind of form in this actually. I'm immediately like, oh, it's autumn wintry. The magic system in this one is super unique. It is a tarot card based magic system, and again, this one almost has that mystery vibe to it. It is a bit of a heist that the characters go on, and you can kind of see from the aesthetic vibes of the book as well just how, I don't know, I guess shrouded these characters feel. It just feels, again, moody, atmospheric. How many times can I say miserable and moody in this video? Leave a guess in the comments. Again, the romance in this book wasn't a huge part of the plot line like it kind of is within Anathema and like it was within the Sacred Space Between. This definitely, I thought, came plot first, romance afterwards, and it does interlink a little bit. Not any specific horror vibes in this one. It is a really true Gothic feeling fantasy romance. And whilst it's adult, this one had no specific spice in there. Neither really did The Night and the Moth, but that one has got a bit more mention of explicit scenes than this duology did. And this one is a completed series. Other than the standalone, I don't think any of the ones I've mentioned so far have been completed. So if you're looking for 2 books to pick up where you can just read them back to back and you're done, this could be a good one. I've banged on about this one for years. It has been one of my 5-star Gothic fantasy romance reads and recommendations for a long time. And actually, I recommend this one a lot around Halloween, but there is nothing specifically kind of spooky about it in the way that I think that you could only read this at Halloween. I actually feel like this maybe makes more of a general kind of Gothic read, which I would read all year anyway, but I feel like there's something at this time of year, particularly, in fact, if it's misty outside, you have to read this book. Those are the rules. I don't make them. This one is Regency-esque as well, which I really enjoyed about the kind of period that this was set in, and it deals with a female main character that has a monster inside of her mind. If I had to pick between this and The Night and the Moth for my favourite Rachel Gillig titles, I would definitely say these are probably taking the lead for me, but I'm going to wait to cast judgment until book 2 is out for Night and the Moth. These ones definitely feel more Gothic than The Night and the Moth did. That one feels more kind of, I guess, cozy in an odd way. And the last book in the adult fantasy selection of books is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. This one has no romance, so perfect for you if you don't like romance in your fantasy book. I say it has no romance, there is like maybe a scene that could be romantic, but is not really. This one does have fantasy dark academia vibes, but also this one got me very emotional. I cried a lot at this. This changed my brain chemistry. If you're looking for a dark academia that is dark not only in its aesthetic, but also like within the plot is dark, it is gritty, the world is dark, the characters' motivations are dark. This is all around dark everything. I thought this was so unique and also just expertly written. This is the only M.L. Wang book that I've ever read. I've heard incredible things about The Sword of Kaigen, but I haven't got around to it just yet. But this definitely sat in that kind of more high, epic fantasy autumn read for me. And again, this is something you could read all year round. I think I originally read this in a January. And there are parts of this that feel really kind of icy and wintry as well in the way that the world is set up. Whilst this isn't a dystopian fantasy at all, I do think it has very interesting things to say about the future of our own world, or I guess the current state of our world. It says lots of things about our world, maybe some things in the past in our world as well. It deals with some pretty heavy themes and topics. The ending of this book, absolutely. If you make content, I would recommend filming yourself reading the last few chapters of this. I did that and I never posted it, but it was really interesting to see the faces I polled. There was like shock, relief, heartbreak, disbelief, and then just pain, pure pain and trauma at the end there. But fantastic. Again, another 5-star read. One I always recommend, and I think lots of you will enjoy this one. I will say as well, this is kind of unlike anything I've ever read. Like sometimes I can see similarities, like for example, Night and the Moth, Sacred Space Between, Anathema reminds me of some other Gothic fantasy romances. But this, I can't really think of anything that feels like this. It seems to blend a couple of genres to make something magical. And I think this is one of the books that I've read where the main character is flawed and pretty badly so, but the way this story is explored and like the way that we get to know her and her struggles, I found myself rooting for her and hating her all at the same time. Probably not one if you're looking to feel hopeful, but if you are looking to get into your feelings, again, curled up with a drink, maybe some like dark academia atmospheric music on in the background, this one's going to be a fantastic one for you. Next category, I think we look at some YA fantasies. Whilst we're on the topic of dark academia, one I've read recently and really enjoyed, and I'm not seeing enough hype about this, is Immortal Consequences by Ivy Marie. This is an academy-based dark academia, and this follows 6 characters. The thing I found very interesting about this is that they're all dead. This is set at an academy that's like on the cusp of the afterlife, and every 100 years or so, I believe one student gets the chance to complete a trial, and if they complete it, they can decide to either level up their magic and kind of join the elite people that have graduated, or they can choose to pass over into whatever the rest of death holds for them, although nobody knows what that is. However, this year is a bit different because there are 6 students that have all been selected to compete for the honour. These characters are fantastic. There's a bit of rivals to lovers romance in here. There's a bit of like, I will stab everyone in the back to get what I want kind of characters. I ended up loving and hating all 6 of them in various different levels. There are such juicy betrayals, like the storyline unfolded so quick, I couldn't stop flicking through this. And again, I just thought this felt so unique. I love this element of dark academia, but on the cusp of the afterlife, like all of these people were dead and yet they still had so much to fight for. It felt shadowy, the magic felt dark in nature. The setting was just delicious. In fact, I think on the naked hardback there is a map of the campus. It felt very reminiscent of more Gothic architectural design in the buildings that they're staying in as like dorms, you know, like a more historic university would feel. And yeah, absolutely jam-packed with like secrets and people hiding things and lying to each other. It just felt like, I actually would really describe this. If you enjoyed the Atlas 6, or perhaps if you wanted to enjoy the Atlas 6, but you found the writing style a little difficult to get into, I would give Immortal Consequences a go. This felt like a YA, more fantasy version of the Atlas 6. But they're all dead. But again, even though they're all dead, there's nothing specifically Halloween-y about this. It doesn't feel particularly creepy or spooky or anything like that. Just again, that kind of wintry chill of ghost stories, I guess, was woven within this. Next up is another dark academia fantasy. I promise it's the last dark academia fantasy on this list, but I can't help it. This is the time of year that I really started to eat up a lot of dark academia novels. This one is possibly my favourite book of all time. The fact I've said that means that now some of you know what this is immediately. That is A Study in Drowning and A Theory of Dreaming by Ava Reid. This is now a completed duology, and I would recommend reading them both. Whilst this does have fantasy elements, I'd say initially this just felt more like a true dark academia, although I guess my preference is always dark academia with fantasy elements in there anyway. But I spent a lot of time, I guess, alongside the main character trying to figure out if the fantasy elements were real, if they were in her brain, if like it was just a figment of the world. Ava Reid's writing style is definitely more poetic and lyrical than a lot of the other authors on this list. And I know that some people can really struggle to get into it if they aren't used to that. This, I would say, is the most accessible of Ava Reid's writing. I think if you've tried any of her other books and struggled previously to get into the writing style, I think this is the one that you're going to do that with. And I always recommend people start with this one actually because it's my favourite thing she's ever wrote. There is such a sense of yearning between these two rivals and a rivals to lovers romance plotline. This feels reminiscent to me, or I guess vice versa. This feels connected to me a little bit to Blood Over Brighthaven. Looking at some of those barriers for women specifically in academia or in academic settings and the leg ups that their male counterparts are given just for being male. But also this had such a fantastic backdrop of like this local town that was a bit run down and kind of deserted and again moody. It had this onslaught of rain and flooding and the weather is just horrific the whole time. It's fantastic. And a lot of the story is set at this like creaking manor that's on the edge of a cliff that could at any moment plunge into the ocean. The cottage that Effie ends up staying in is cold and has a big breeze and a leak. And overall the atmosphere of this book just lives in my brain rent-free. The romance is fantastic as well, and there is a wider fantasy setting within this world that is definitely explored more in book 2. This for me was a fantastic continuation of the series, but it does take us away from that setting. It looks at some of the aftermath of what our characters are now dealing with. Like, this isn't necessarily a happy ending, and I think book 2 goes to prove that. I have goosebumps just talking to you about this, actually. I don't know what it is. There's just something so magical about this book to me. Ava Reid's writing in general is a perfect option for this time of year. So if this one doesn't quite sound like you, or you're looking for something that is more adult focused, I'd recommend maybe Lady Macbeth or Juniper and Thorn. But if you've never read any Ava Reid, make this your first. This one is a fantastic addition to the Ava Reid collection. And then the last YA recommendation I have for this video is actually a little bit more focused on that fantasy romance element, and I also recommend this for Halloween, but I think you could read this all the time, and you should read this all the time. This is the Crimson Moth duology, which includes book 1, The Crimson Moth, and book 2, The Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. This one is definitely a lighter suggestion. The romance in this is so funny to me. Like, it is delicious and juicy, but the fact that they're so paranoid about each other, and they're both like, I know exactly what that person is trying to do, but I'm falling for it anyway. This has that Regency-esque type of timeline that I mentioned that we've seen in some of the other picks as well. And I don't know if my brain just likes to think this is like Moody Bridgerton, but that's kind of where I've got to. This is Witch and Witch Hunter romantasy. Again, I've mentioned the word witchy quite a few times for some of the books on this list. This one I think is the first one so far that has been like a true witch fantasy, although there are elements of kind of witchcraft and magic in some of the others I've mentioned. This one feels cozy and autumnal because it just does. The element of the witch and the witch hunters and the enemies to lovers romance is so delicious. I love the way the magic system works in this. It was really unique to me, and it's kind of based around blood magic. But there was something about like these rainy nights and the gas lamps, and they're going to like the opera in these extravagant ball gowns, but she's deceiving him and he's deceiving her, and they're fake dating and they should hate each other but they can't help but fall in love. So juicy. And this one's completed as well. So if you are looking for something that actually has more of a focus on romance, or you're looking for something that is definitely more fantasy or witchy, then I would definitely recommend these two. The next category are books that are technically adult fantasies, but ish. There's 4 on this list, although 3 of them are by the same author and are kind of connected, so I will tell you about those as one. These books are all kind of set within our own version of a contemporary world, and they have elements of kind of magical realism, I guess, or there's like things that can only be explained away with magic. So technically they're fantasies, but they are more... Urban fantasy doesn't feel like the right categorization either. I've been calling them contemporary fantasies, which doesn't really make sense, I don't think. I guess they kind of feel a little bit everyday until that magic hits, and then they just feel so fantastical. Anyway, I'm just going to tell you about them. If you know anything about me, you probably knew that the Adrian Young adult books were coming up on this section of the list. These are all standalones. As far as I'm aware, there's no connections between any of these, but I would recommend reading all of them. These all have the perfect autumnal vibes. A lot of them are kind of smaller town settings, a kind of cozy mystery style of plotline, smaller magical elements or kind of an element of magical realism. And the pace of these stories and kind of the amount of stuff that happens in them actually feels slower. It feels kind of more relaxed as we dive into this. You know, there's no knights in shining armour, there's no massive battles and wars. This kind of takes maybe relationships or things that might seem more everyday or mundane and really does something great with them. Just to show you the books, so you have all the titles. The first one I'd recommend reading, I just would recommend them in publication order, is Spells for Forgetting. This one specifically has some hints of witchcraft, kind of more holistic remedies and spells. It has this small island setting, and again, there's a lot to do here with the weather. This one, in fact, they all have, just the third one have romance in. This one does have some romance, and it's kind of told across 2 time periods. It's what happens to our character now and what happened about a decade ago, I think 10 years ago. And the connections that she's making between the two and the mystery of what happened all that time ago that's now starting to unravel. But it has those small island vibes, you know, they're very popular. I think it even mentions in the autumn they're really popular for their apple picking. Lots of tourists come over to do that. So this honestly was a slower and cozier read. And I can't think of a lot of fantasy books that I read that kind of fit within the genre of fantasy-ish, like contemporary but with some magical realism kinda. But these immediately come to mind, particularly if you're used to reading contemporary fiction and you're looking to get more into fantasy. These are a very gentle introduction. Or vice versa, I think if you like the addition of magic to your story but you are wanting to read something that feels a bit more like a modern day murder mystery or a modern day whodunit kind of thing, these might be more of your street. The next one is The Unmaking of June Farrow, and again, these aren't connected that I'm aware of, so you could actually read them in any order. This one gets compared a lot to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I can kind of see. Again, like the characters in this feel very everyday, but for some reason there's something a little bit different about June Farrow. I will say these kind of have the same level of unsatisfying ending in the same way that The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue does. Not that I was left unsatisfied having read it, but in the way that like this is not necessarily a happy ending, it's not necessarily a sad ending. It's kind of left with a bit of a question mark of what happens next in all of these. But I really enjoyed this one too. I'd say this one's probably my least favourite of the 3, although I know that's very controversial. Most people's favourite is this one, or for a lot of people this is the only one they've read. But this one's my least favourite. I don't know why, it's still a 5-star read. But of the 3, this is one I prefer the least. The last one is the newest one. This is A Sea of Unspoken Things. This one felt like it had a bit more of a suspense element to it, a little bit more of a thrill element to it, as it's kind of woven. The magic is woven into the story, but less so in this one than it is, for example, in The Unmaking of June Farrow. This one definitely felt more everyday, kind of suspense, and then yeah, the addition of some of that magic really wasn't that easy to see in the first bit. I was kind of reading this like, oh, have I got this wrong? Is this not the same kind of thing as these? But it absolutely is. It just took me a moment to get there. Again, I really enjoyed the setting of this one. It felt very small town. There was lots of like huge woods around, elements of like camping and cabins and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I feel like the character art in some of these, because they're all special editions, really sums up how these feel to read. And again, all 3 of them have that element of mystery that I think is particularly cozy to tease out at this time of year. The last book in this list of kind of fantasy-ish or like magical realism-ish is a brand new release, and that is Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. I think so many of you are going to have read this already, but this has lots of the things I've already mentioned in this video. So it has one of those kind of like mystery plot lines where you're following along with the character and trying to figure out what's going on and who's causing the trouble. The magics in this one feels definitely more subtle but very whimsical in the way that I know Stephanie Garber writes a lot of her books. There's a big focus on kind of folk tales and urban legends in this one that I think we can all be very familiar with. I know we've all found ourselves deep on the internet reading into an urban myth and wondering if it might be real. This is that, but one step further, and everything about this just felt so fresh. I can't think of anybody who writes like Stephanie Garber writes. If you've read her fantasy series, then this is completely different, but it still keeps some of that oddness, some of that wackiness, some of that whimsicality. And I did not see the ending of this one coming. I often say I was reading this and I didn't really know what was happening, but I was enjoying the journey it was taking me on. And I gave this 5 stars, so that is not a negative critique at all. I genuinely had no clue where this was going to go. I have previously said I thought this was a standalone as well, but I think Stephanie Garber has said she's writing more in this world, so I don't know if that's going to continue this story with these characters, or if it's going to be a bit like the Adrian Young ones where we get something new. This one, again, a bit more focused on making deals with the devil and like some of those figures that might pop up within urban legends, but I really enjoyed this. And I honestly think go into this one not knowing a whole bunch about what it's about. That's how I experienced it, and that's how I'd really recommend you do so. And don't worry if you're like, I have no clue what's happening, because I think you're not supposed to. I just have 2 books left to tell you about, and these are both dark academias, but these are more contemporary picks that don't really have any elements of fantasy in them. Both of these are also romances. One of them is much darker than the other, but I will tell you about both of them. And yeah, definitely more for you if you're more of a contemporary romance reader. First on that list is Nightshade by Autumn Woods, and this is definitely the lighter of the 2 I'm going to talk about. Both of these are adult, and again, both of these have some element of mystery and murder and plotting that I just think is perfect at this time of year. This one is dark academia-esque, and like the academy bit in this bit is really kind of high on the list of things it ticks off for me. It's set in the Scottish Highlands as well, and I can't help but think that the Scottish Highlands is just inherently autumnal. It's just me with trees. If anybody doesn't know, I'm a big tree fan, and I feel like I've just found all the books with lots of trees in them. And I've gone, that'll do. Autumn winter recommendations. The romance in this one is juicy. It definitely feels super contemporary. Everything down to like the dress style, like the fashion sense of our main character just feels like to a T dark academia and perfectly autumn. I would quite like to go for a walk and get a coffee and have a hike through the woods with these characters. Again, the trees. Why can't I get away from the trees? A bit of an enemies to lovers, and definitely some contemporary romance tropes in here that I think you'll enjoy if you've read a lot from the genre. And again, it has this really beautiful Gothic architectural college or academy that it's set at, and I think the setting of this one's perfect. Also, the pacing of this, it does feel a little bit slower, in a good way, like in the way that you can kind of take your time with this, maybe eat it in bite-sized chunks, or you could just devour the whole thing in one day like I did. I feel like it's not well known that I love this book. This is actually described as an academic romance rather than, you know, specifically a dark academia. But I have 1 copy. I have the indie copy. I have the works edition, and I also have this one-off like special edition that the author did a while back. So I feel like I don't talk about this one enough that people know that I love it, but I really do. And the last book in this list of more contemporary dark academia fiction is Nocticardia by Kerry Lake. I told you there was another Kerry Lake book coming up, and here it is. This one, again, is a dark romance. Please check the triggers on this one because it is quite dark. In terms of like the setting is dark, a lot of the characters around the main character is dark. There are lots of dark themes within the story. The male main character is very morally dark. The romance is dark. Everything's dark. This one still has that gore, horror, particularly like bodily horror element to it. It has a bit of creep and eeriness to it, even though it is a contemporary fiction. The romance is great. There's spice in this as well if you do like a bit of a spicier book. And I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did. This is kind of what set me off on my Kerry Lake journey. This is the first book that I ever read from Kerry Lake, and I absolutely adored it, which is why I've jumped into Anathema now. This one definitely has more elements of thrill. It's quite fast paced. There's quite a lot of suspense in here. There's quite a lot of action. There's characters that you're definitely going to be questioning their morals, and you're going to be looking at the male main character like, why am I attracted to him? Because I really shouldn't be. This one has a bit of a professor-student relationship going on in there as well, so a little bit of taboo or an element of the forbidden. Really, really fantastic. This was a 5-star read for me. In fact, I think most of the books on this list have been 4 or 5 stars. This for me feels like the same vibes as Gothicana, controversially. I prefer this. In fact, I don't think that's that controversial. I liked Gothicana. That's the only book I've read from Runix, and I do want to read others, so not to put Gothicana down at all. But this was definitely more my speed when it came to that kind of more modern, dark, contemporary romance with dark academia vibes. And that is everything. Those are all the books I'd recommend you pick up whilst it's raining outside. I don't know what I'm going to call this video, like moody books for moody gals, books to read if you want to feel miserable, books to read when it's raining outside. I really don't know what I'm going to call this, like books that are perfect for autumn. We'll see. But all of that is true of all of these. These are the books I'd recommend you read now. Like, this is the perfect time of year to devour all of these. Obviously, feel free to cherry pick. If there was 2 or 3 series or even just one series that really sounded like a bit of you, make sure you're adding it to your TBR. And before you leave, make sure you do like this video, subscribe if you aren't already, but also leave me a note in the comments of like, what is your ultimate perfect autumnal read? What is the book you're wanting to pick up to reread? Or like if a friend comes to you and says, hey, I really want to read something, I'm stuck in all weekend because the weather's terrible, what would you recommend I curl up with? What is the book you're telling them to? Tell me your recommendation in the comments below. Thank you so much if you've gotten this far in the video. If you have enjoyed this, then you might like the other content that I'm making, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next one.